Thank you, Mr. President. As you and everybody here knows that a little bit over a week ago, fires broke out in Los Angeles County. And so many of you have reached out in the time since to offer your support, offer your assistance, and even offer condolences for those who have perished in this significant disaster. And I want to thank you for your initial outreach. My colleague, Senator Schiff, and I have come to the floor today to provide you all a little bit of an update and to lay a foundation on some of the key issues that we're going to need to work together on as we move forward. And let me begin by just taking a step back for a second and acknowledging that even before the winds increased last week, we knew that the risk of a potential large fire was high. In the midst of a historically dry season in Southern California, forecasters predicted hurricane-force winds along with little to no humidity. Essentially, a dry hurricane condition, if you can imagine that. Californians know that when there's a red flag warning, conditions are ripe for large-scale fires. But what came next, what actually materialized, would become the worst natural disaster in the history of Los Angeles. 100-mile-per-hour winds carrying burning embers from home to home, multiple simultaneous fires, burning more than 12,000 structures and more than 40,000 acres. And to give you a sense of the area I'm talking about nearly 3 times the size of Manhattan. At least 24 people have lost their lives, with more expected as search and rescue crews continue to comb through the devastation. And over the course of the last week, I've had the opportunity to visit command posts and meet with firefighters. I've had the opportunity to distribute meals to many of the victims and to see, to tour, to visit the destruction firsthand. Yes, there are survivors, people impacted from communities like the Pacific Palisades, some with names and faces that you'll recognize from television and the entertainment industry. But I assure you there's also a lot of other faces and families that you won't recognize from the working class and diverse communities throughout Los Angeles County. It's people like a woman in Altadena who was 9 months pregnant when the Eaton fire burned down not just her home, but the new nursery that she had prepared. And it's a 66-year-old man who stayed to try to protect the home that had been in his family for 5 decades, but who was found dead with a garden hose in his hand. You can imagine his last moments. It's one of the reasons why I've been saying over and over that every house you see is really a home, and every home represents a family who now mourns maybe the loss of a relative, maybe the loss of their home, or a loss of irreplaceable items like family photo albums, or a wedding dress, or baby pictures of a loved one's red, white, and blue military burial flag. But through the destruction, we've also seen some signs of hope, like the firefighter in the Pacific Palisades who offered to go back and save 2 dogs trapped while the neighborhood was still burning, or a 14-year-old Avery who saw the devastation that hit her community and created a charity, Altadena Girls, to provide beauty products and clothes to her friends so that they could feel like themselves again while coping with this disaster. Every day we hear stories like theirs. Even in the midst of a disaster, people coming to each other's aid. But even as we stand here today, the fires are still burning, and the fight continues. Our hearts go out to all the impacted families, and they also go out to the heroic firefighters and other first responders working tirelessly through multi-day shifts to put out these fires. Not only the brave state and local firefighters, but I want to acknowledge the federal firefighters too. To the state and local officials working day and night to protect our state and our communities, thank you. And I also want to acknowledge Governor Newsom for his steady hand during this time. And we are so grateful to our neighboring states who continue to send resources. And no, not just states that are considered blue states like Oregon and Washington, but states that many people refer to as red states like South Dakota and Wyoming and Montana and Florida, who continue to send resources with no strings attached, no conditions. This is what we do for each other. There's a reason it's called mutual aid. And I also want to thank every one of my colleagues who, in 2023, helping to secure 7 C-130 air tankers for California. They were surplus military aircraft that California received and paid to retrofit, the first of which is already on the scene fighting these fires as we speak. But soon there will come a time when we need to more than just support our response to these disasters. We'll need support for our recovery. And we expect Congress to support California, just as Congress has been there for states across the country in their times of crisis, with no conditions and no strings attached. Because our recovery isn't just a California fight. We're truly in this together as Americans. Whether it's wildfires across the western United States or tornadoes in the Midwest, ice storms in Texas, or hurricanes in the Southeast, Mother Nature does not distinguish between red states and blue states, and neither should our disaster response efforts or our recovery efforts. That's why when tragedy struck just a few months ago from Hurricanes Milton and Helene, Democrats didn't demand aid be attached to some Democratic wish list of priorities. Not for a second did we think of attaching strings. So when I hear about political jabs and insults on social media while my home state is burning, it's not distracting, it's certainly not entertaining, it's offensive, and it is dangerous. Because let's be clear, in times of crisis, California has always been there for the rest of our country. And now we expect our country to be here for California. If Speaker Johnson or any member of Congress for that matter is worried about the federal debt, let me assure you, California has already paid the bill. California, as you may know, is the largest economy of any state in the nation. We're the single largest contributor of tax revenue to the federal treasury by far. In 2022 alone, California paid $83 billion more to the federal government than it received. So from additional disaster assistance funding to a serious conversation about disaster insurance that I'm eager to continue, we're going to need everyone on board. And to my Republican colleagues who may be wondering whether the policy should change about no strings attached, let me remind you that this is also a fundamental matter of decency as Americans. It's the same decency that my colleague, Senator Scott from Florida, and my colleague, Senator Tillis from North Carolina, have shown in their public comments this last week, or that several of my California House Republican colleagues have shown by supporting our state's major disaster declaration request. They know, as we should all remember, that this is about our unity as a nation. So yes, California will need you for the long haul. And to President-elect Trump, I too invite you to tour Altadena and the Pacific Palisades, which, by the way, is just about 30 miles from your golf course in Rancho Palos Verdes. Come meet the first responders. Come meet the families that have been affected by these fires. And finally, I want to speak to the people of California, because it is indeed a long road ahead. And there will be more challenges to overcome as we continue the search and rescue phase of this, as we go into the environmental remediation and the debris removal and eventually the rebuilding of homes and businesses. It's a long road and there will be challenges to overcome indeed, but I promise you this, that there will be a day when the fires are put out, when the homes and entire communities are rebuilt better and more resilient than they've been before, and the sun will shine and the kids will smile. Together, we're going to get through this. Thank you, Mr. President.
Mr. President,
Senator from California.
I rise today to address the Senate on behalf of the people of California, and I thank my colleague, Senator Padilla, for his leadership during this time of incredible difficulty and strain for our fellow constituents. The unimaginable has happened, and our hearts are broken. A city encircled and ablaze in a perfect storm of fire and wind, and with a system stretched beyond its breaking point. A natural disaster so immense in size and scale it will dwarf any recovery and rebuilding effort since the 1906 San Francisco earthquake and fire. It is that immense and impending recovery effort that I'm pleading for your help with today. Already the support that you and the President have given California have helped firefighters battle the flames, helped save lives, and helped those who have lost everything find shelter. And I want to express my particular appreciation for President Biden and what the administration has done. The almost immediate declaration of a disaster which unlocked important FEMA and other funding, the commitment to provide really 100% of federal funding for the first 6 months of these fire mitigation efforts. Very grateful for what the Congress and the President have done. This recovery is going to be measured in years, not months. Even so, we must bring a sense of urgency to the recovery and not let it linger. When the flames are finally out, the cleanup begins in earnest and the rebuilding moves forward with all haste. After the attention of the world has turned away from the raging inferno and its aftermath, ours in this body must not. Because the loss is immeasurable. Lives lost, homes lost, businesses lost, neighborhoods lost, pets lost, memories lost, neighborhoods simply gone in an hour. Entire communities burned to ash, families brought together in grief, churches and synagogues have burned down, but their members still gather as one. Because amidst the darkness and destruction, we have seen rays of hope. For when one part of our state is hurting, literally on fire, we all come together. First responders from all across our great state and so many others rushed to Southern California. A woman I met at a Red Cross Pacoima evacuation site, so grateful despite everything for the assistance that she was receiving, for the dignity with which she was treated by these Red Cross workers. She told me she plans to set up a $10 a month donation from her monthly Social Security disability check. People dropping off clothes and supplies by the thousands, so much that some of these centers are overwhelmed with people bringing material by. That's the California way. This is deeply personal for Senator Padilla and myself. We know so many families impacted by these fires because they're our neighbors and friends. I represented Altadena in the House of Representatives for decades. It is a vibrant, diverse community, a city of families, of places to worship, of deep culture and history. When I drove through Altadena just a few days ago, the destruction was complete. Entire city blocks razed. Homes, small businesses, schools gone in just a few minutes, like some post-apocalyptic scene driving around that area at night in which small fires still dotted the landscape amidst the rubble. It was hard to even recognize what I was seeing. The place where my wife and I got married burned to the ground. So many other community institutions vanished. The Altadena Community Church, gone. The Pasadena Jewish Temple, gone. Still smoldering, that temple, when I saw it, and burning inside like an eternal flame, a symbol of God's presence even amidst the unimaginable. The mountains above Altadena, once the scene of such beautiful greenery and nature, now charred beyond recognition. And just like Altadena, much of the Palisades are just gone. Fire ripped through this community, leveling entire neighborhoods. One bakery owner in Topanga described the fires that tore through her community simply as Armageddon. Charred cars, burned out furniture, block after block. These were generational homes and neighborhoods people are proud to be part of and raise their children in, now forever changed. In Altadena, Victor Shaw was found in his house holding a garden hose. He died trying to save his home. His sister Sherry barely escaped as the house went up in flames. One man, Zaire, was separated from his sister who lived next door. In the midst of the chaos, he was able to evacuate his baby, an elderly mother. But the next day when he returned, he found his sister's car outside her home and found her remains in the rubble. "Evelyn, why didn't you leave?" he asked. "Why didn't you leave?" One father who refused to leave the side of his son who had cerebral palsy, fighting to his last breath. The last words he said were to his daughter, "Baby, I'm getting ready to evacuate. I love you, baby. I gotta go. The fires made it to my yard." Anthony Mitchell, a hero. Edgar McGregor is well known in Pasadena for his daily trash pickups in the foothills. But now to the community, he'll be known for something more. In a Facebook post, he alerted residents 2 days before the fires to pack go bags. And when it mattered most, he typed 2 words: "Get out." Get out. His simple post may have saved lives. People are surviving now, but only barely hanging on. I spoke with Patricia at one of the shelters on the west side. She stayed a couple nights at a motel but could no longer afford it, and her asthma was making it hard to breathe. One firefighter, Jonathan, had been battling the blazes in the Palisades since the first night. I remember talking to this LA Fire Department firefighter, and he had told me he wasn't sure he was going to make it out when he was there during the early hours of the fire. And I asked him what that was like, and he said, well, there were flames in front of me and flames behind me. The water was running low, my communications were going out, and he said it was the closest thing to hell that I can imagine. One family in Altadena, who all lived on the same street, lost 3 homes. What was once a dream to live so close to each other had turned into a nightmare. Over the past week, we've seen firefighters exhausted and yet unyielding, waging war to save communities and lives and property. And in the last few days, we've seen some hopeful signs as the level of containment particularly of the Eaton fire, has increased. More slowly, the containment of the Palisades fire. But we are not out of the woods. We've seen neighbors helping neighbors. We've seen Angelenos opening their doors to strangers, left with little more than the clothes on their back. These are the angels who remind us that even in our darkest hours, through smoky skies and uncertain times, we do not stand alone. Because what makes this city of Los Angeles so extraordinary, what makes California extraordinary, is that we are not defined by our tragedies. We are defined by our response to them. In Los Angeles, resilience is a way of life. It's what has allowed the city to rise from the devastation of earthquakes and floods and riots and fires time and again, and emerge stronger, more resilient, more united, more compassionate. This is a moment when we can and must call ourselves to the better angels of our nature, the angels that are all around us, the paramedics who rescued and evacuated seniors from a nursing home at the edge of a fire line, the volunteers I met who showed up at a shelter ready to help before anyone even asked, the father who stayed behind to try desperately to keep his son alive. In the coming weeks, after the fires are extinguished, we will seek answers. We must not do so for partisan gain or seeking fault, in fact, just the opposite. Because only with the truth about what went right and what went wrong can we arrive at solutions. I remember talking to one woman who lost her trailer in the Palisades. She wants answers about the lack of water to fight the fires. I want to know that too. I want to know if the federal and state resources we are fighting to procure will be enough to stop the next potential mega fire. I want to know what we can do to rebuild and rebuild with speed, so the neighborhoods that we lost can be reclaimed by the neighbors who have been displaced, and communities can come together once more. I'm grateful for the governor's efforts to streamline the permitting process so that people can begin to rebuild and rebuild quickly. And I want to know if there was anything more that we can do or could have done to save more lives and more homes. We should all want that. We should all want to rebuild because Los Angeles is one of our nation's great cities. And to rebuild, we will need your help without fanfare or partisan rancor. We need your help. Just like we worked together to help rebuild New Orleans and Louisiana after Hurricane Katrina, we must do so again here. Just like after countless hurricanes struck Florida and the South, we rushed in aid. Just this year after Hurricane Helene, FEMA is still on the ground in North Carolina helping those in its destructive path. And we won't leave, we can't until the job is finished. That's what we must do here. During my time in Congress, I've seen a lot of disaster aid bills. Never in my time have I ever considered whether an area votes red or blue. When people need help, we get them help. When people are fighting to rebuild, we help them rebuild, period. That cannot and should not change, no matter who is president, no matter who's in charge of Congress, no matter who the governor is or who their senators are. That is my urgent plea today. We need your help desperately. Southern California, we will rebuild. We will. But whether we can do so quickly will depend on the actions we take in the next few months. This big, beautiful, diverse city is not just made of steel and stone, but of people. People who stand together when the skies turn dark and rise together when the smoke clears. We are going to rise again because it's who we are. And when we do, we'll show the world what it truly means to be the city of angels. Thank you, Mr. President, and I yield back.